My neighbor stole my parking space every day for a year. I documented every single one. Then I submitted it all the morning their lease came up for renewal. The morning I finally submitted the folder, I made myself a coffee first. Full pour-over, the slow kind, with the gooseneck kettle and the hand grinder and the whole ritual that my coworkers make fun of me for. I ground the beans at 7:52 a.m. I bloomed the grounds at 7:54. I poured in 3 slow circles, the way the YouTube video taught me, and I watched the water darken and the foam rise, and I stood at my kitchen counter feeling something I can only describe as the specific peace of a person who has been patient for a very long time and is about to stop being patient. At 8:03 a.m., I opened my laptop. At 8:04 a.m., I attached a 214-page PDF to an email addressed to Sandra Okafor, property manager, Lakeview Commons Residential, and 3 members of the building's management board whose addresses I had obtained through the complex's publicly listed HOA documentation. The subject line was, Formal Documentation of Lease Violation, Unit 4C, 347 incidents over 12 months. I pressed send. Then I picked up my coffee, walked to my window, and looked down at the parking lot. At space 14B. My space, the one on my lease, the one I paid $85 a month for in addition to my rent, the one that had my unit number stenciled in faded yellow paint on the asphalt in front of it. The space that was, at this particular moment, occupied by a silver Nissan Altima with a dream catcher on the rearview mirror and a bumper sticker that said, Good vibes only. I drank my coffee. I waited. My phone buzzed at 8:31 a.m. Sandra Okafor. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. I did not listen to the voicemail. I already knew what it said, more or less, because I had been imagining this moment for 11 months and 3 weeks, and the human mind, given sufficient time and motivation, gets very good at running scenarios. At 9:14 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, then a knock on the door of 4C, which is directly across from mine. I walked to my peephole and looked through it. Sandra Okafor was standing in the hallway with a printed document in her hand and an expression on her face that I had not seen there before in 2 years of interactions with her, which is the expression of someone who has been presented with 214 pieces of evidence and has run out of ways to not take them seriously. The door of 4C opened, and that is where this story really begins. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 31 years old. I am a data analyst for a regional insurance firm, which means I spend 8 to 10 hours a day looking at numbers and asking what they mean and building cases for why those numbers say what I think they say. I am very good at this. I am the kind of person who notices patterns before other people notice them, who keeps records the way other people keep hobbies, and who has, on at least 3 documented occasions, won arguments with insurance adjusters by producing spreadsheet documentation they did not expect me to have. I tell you this not to establish that I am impressive. I am a man who keeps spreadsheets and makes pour-over coffee. The bar for impressive is elsewhere. But to establish that when I say I documented something thoroughly, I mean it in a specific, professional, slightly abnormal sense that you should take seriously. I moved into Lakeview Commons in March of the previous year, Unit 4D, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, southeast-facing windows that get good morning light, which was the deciding factor. The parking space, 14B, was listed in my lease on page 3, paragraph 7, as a dedicated resident amenity, included at an additional monthly fee of $85. I read my lease. I always read my lease. The first time I came home and found someone else in 14B, I assumed it was a mistake. It was a silver Nissan Altima with a dream catcher on the mirror. It was parked perfectly, not diagonal, not hanging over the line, right in the center of my space, with the confidence of a car that belongs exactly where it is. I parked in a visitor space, which are the 6 unmarked spots near the entrance, and I noted the license plate of the Altima, Oregon plates, KFJ 2847, with the mild irritation of someone who assumes the problem will resolve itself. It resolved itself by 10 p.m. The Altima was gone. I moved my car. I did not think about it again. The second time was 4 days later. Same car, same space. I parked in visitor again. This time I mentioned it to the Altima as I walked past. Not to the driver, who wasn't visible, just to the car itself, in the way you talk to inanimate objects when you are alone in a parking lot at 6:45 p.m. and slightly tired. You're in my spot, I told the dream catcher. The dream catcher swayed gently on the mirror and did not respond. The third time, I left a note. Polite. Printed, because my handwriting is terrible. Hi! I think you may have parked in my assigned space by mistake. Space 14B is assigned to Unit 4D. Thank you. I put a smiley face at the end, because I believe in de-escalation as a first principle. The note was gone the next morning. The Altima came back that evening. That was when I started to understand this was not a mistake. Her name was Jolene Rafferty. I learned this from the building directory about a week into the situation. Unit 4C, directly across the hall from me, which explained how she'd identified my space. She would have seen me leave in the morning, watched which space I returned to, clocked the distance between my spot and the entrance and her spot, which was 14F and involved walking around the corner of the building, and made a calculation. My space was closer. My space was more convenient. My space was therefore, in the logic she appeared to operate by, hers. I knocked on her door. She opened it on the second knock. She was in her mid-30s maybe, with the energy of someone who has never in their adult life been told that a thing they wanted was not available to them. She had the dream catcher vibe in person too. Linen everything. A crystal or two visible on the bookshelf behind her. A diffuser going in the corner putting something lavender into the air. Good vibes. Only. Hi, I said. I'm Marcus from 4D. I think you might be parking in my space. She looked at me with an expression that was pleasant and slightly confused, like I'd said something in a foreign language. I'm in the lot, she said. Right, but 14B is my assigned space. It's on my lease. Oh, a pause. I didn't realize it was assigned. I thought the numbering was just like for reference. I want to be fair here because fairness matters to me. There is a version of this where that's an honest misunderstanding. Some parking lots do work that way, but the numbered stencils on the asphalt, paired with the unit numbers painted in the same yellow, are a fairly unambiguous communication system, and Jolene Rafferty did not strike me as someone who had failed to notice them. It's assigned, I said. The lease is pretty specific about it. Mine is 14B. Oh, sure, she said. Sorry about that. I'll figure something out. I thanked her. I went back to my apartment. I felt the mild, pleasant relief of a person who has handled an awkward thing gracefully. She was in my space the next evening. I am going to take you through the escalation chronologically, because the chronology matters. Because I think the thing that drives people crazy about stories like this is not the individual incidents, but the accumulation of them, the way each one lands on top of the previous ones, until the stack is so high it becomes its own separate problem. Week 2. Jolene is in 14B approximately 4 evenings out of 7. I park and visit her. I email Sandra Okafor for the first time. A polite, factual email describing the situation, including the neighbor's unit number, the license plate, and the dates I'd observed the violation. Sandra responds within 48 hours, saying she'll send a reminder to all residents about assigned parking. A generic reminder goes out to the building. Jolene is in my space the following evening. Week 4. I knock on Jolene's door a second time. She opens it and her face does something that I will come to recognize as her tell, a brief, almost imperceptible arrangement into an expression of surprised innocence, like a person who has just been caught at something and is deciding in real time to be surprised instead of caught. Oh gosh, she says, I thought I'd figured it out. I'll be more careful. She is in my space the next morning, which is a Saturday, and stays in it until 2 p.m., week 6. I send a second email to Sandra. Sandra calls me this time, and is audibly more tired than in the previous communication. She says she's spoken to the resident in 4C and reminded her of the parking policy. I ask if there's any enforcement mechanism. Sandra says she can issue a formal warning. I ask her to do that. She says she will. Jolene is in my space 6 out of 7 days the following week. That is when I made the decision. I had, by this point, lost approximately 40 visitor space parking instances, spent an estimated 6 to 8 additional minutes per incident walking the longer distance from the visitor spaces to my entrance, and submitted 2 formal complaints that had produced exactly 0 behavioral change in Jolene Rafferty. I had also begun to feel something that I want to describe precisely, because I think it's important. Not rage, not obsession, but a very specific and focused frustration with the gap between what a thing is supposed to mean, a signed lease, a numbered space, a formal complaint, and what it actually produces in the world when the other party simply doesn't care. I care about that gap professionally. I quantify it for insurance actuaries, and I decided I was going to quantify it here too. The equipment cost me $340 total. A Wise Cam V3 with weather-resistant housing mounted on a small bracket I attached to the exterior of my window with command strips and a piece of thin copper wire for stability. The camera had a 130-degree field of view that, positioned correctly, covered the entire 14B space plus a portion of 14A and 14C. It ran continuously on a 128GB micro SD card that I swapped out monthly and transferred to an external drive. I also used the Wise app's time-lapse feature, which automatically compiled daily thumbnails I could scan in under a minute to identify whether an incident had occurred. I also installed a secondary backup, a Blink outdoor camera on the other corner of my window, overlapping coverage zone. After a windstorm in month 3 temporarily disrupted the Wise's angle, I built a spreadsheet: date, time of arrival, time of departure, duration, Wise clip reference number, Blink clip reference number, visitor space I'd used as a result, estimated additional walking distance. I gave each incident a unique incident ID in the format LP year, 3-digit sequential number, LP for lot parking. I named the spreadsheet Project 14B in a folder on my desktop called, with some irony I allowed myself, Work stuff. The first incident I logged was LP 2023-001, October 14th, 6:17 p.m. Jolene's Altima pulling into 14B while I was actively trying to pull in myself. I had to reverse out and go around to visit her, and I captured it on both cameras from 2 angles with a clarity that would have satisfied a forensics team. I logged LP 2023-347 on October 12th of the following year, 11 months and 28 days later, 347 incidents. I need you to sit with that number. Not because I want sympathy. I've had people tell me I should have done something sooner and they're not wrong, and I've had people tell me I was obsessive and they're also not entirely wrong, but because 347 is a number that means something specific. It means that for nearly 12 months, on more days than not, a person looked at a thing that belonged to me, looked at the line around it with my number stenciled in yellow paint, and chose to put her car there anyway, repeatedly, without consequence, because consequence had not arrived yet. I was going to be consequence. I want to tell you about the 3 conversations I had in months 5 through 7 that changed how I thought about what I was doing. The first was with my building's HOA representative, a semi-retired contractor named Phil Garrison, who had been on the board for 9 years and who I'd seen at one resident meeting looking deeply tired about everything. I requested a meeting with him directly, not through Sandra, but through the HOA contact email listed on the building's public documentation, and he agreed to coffee in the lobby on a Saturday morning. Phil Garrison is the kind of man who expresses everything through a single sigh. He has the sigh of someone who has seen every version of every neighbor dispute and has accepted, at some cellular level, that they are all essentially the same dispute wearing different clothes. I explained the situation. He sighed. I showed him my spreadsheet. Month 5 at that point, 164 incidents, and I watched his eyebrows go up in a way that temporarily interrupted the sigh. "You've been keeping a log," he said, "since October." He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. Sandra issued a warning, 1 verbal, 1 written, on record. He sighed again, but differently. This was the sigh of someone recalibrating. "The thing is," he said, "a single warning doesn't do much. The enforcement mechanism with parking is lease violations. 3 documented violations, formally filed, triggers a lease review. But Sandra's complaints go in as general notices, not specific violations per incident." He paused. "If you had documented individual violation reports, how specific does the documentation need to be?" He looked at my laptop screen again. "That's specific," he said. "Time-stamped, with the vehicle identification, formally submitted per incident." I nodded. "What's the lease renewal date for 4C? He told me. October 15th. I thanked Phil Garrison very much, drove to a coffee shop, and built out the rest of the submission framework. The second conversation was with a tenant rights attorney named Gwendolyn Park, who had been practicing residential property law in Oregon for 14 years. I found her through a local bar association referral and paid $150 for a 30-minute consultation because I wanted to understand the full legal picture before I committed to a year-long documentation project. "What are your rights here?" she said after I explained. "That's what I want to understand." She was precise and quick in the way that good attorneys are when you've asked a clear question. My lease gave me rights to the specific space. The lease violation section, she had me read her the relevant paragraph while she listened, indicated that repeated lease violations by any resident could be grounds for non-renewal at the management's discretion. The documentation burden was on me to establish the pattern since the management company was demonstrably not building its own record. I could not have the car towed without the management's approval, which they declined to give twice despite my requests. What I could do was build the record that gave the management company no reasonable alternative to taking action. "Here's my honest read," Gwendolyn Park said. "If you submit 1 or 2 incidents, they'll file a note and move on. If you submit a year's worth of time-stamped, video-documented incidents the morning her lease comes up for renewal, the management company has a decision to make. Either they enforce the lease terms, or they're on record choosing not to, which creates liability exposure." I asked her if she thought they'd enforce. "Depends on the management company," she said, "but 347 incidents is a very hard thing to look at and do nothing about." I said I didn't have 347 yet. She said, "Give it time." The third conversation was with my friend Terrence, who is not a professional of any kind relevant to this story, but who is one of the smartest people I know, and who I trust to tell me when I'm being unreasonable. We were at a bar in month 7. I had 203 incidents logged. I told him the full story, the camera, the spreadsheet, the Gwendolyn Park consultation, the plan. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How much time are you spending on this per week?" I thought about it. 15 minutes? 20? The camera does most of it. I just do the weekly review and log, and you're going to keep doing this for 5 more months. 4.5. He drank his beer. Man, he said, I would have lost my mind by month 2. That's because you would have kept confronting her, I said. Confronting her doesn't work. She just resets. Every confrontation is a new start for her. I needed something she couldn't reset. Terrence thought about this. So you're basically building a case. I'm building a case. He pointed his beer at me. Don't tell anyone about this until it's over. They'll tell you to stop. He was not wrong about that either. Month 9 was when things got complicated. Jolene had apparently noticed the camera. I don't know exactly when. I reviewed the footage, and there's a moment in early July where she pauses in the parking lot and looks up at my window with an expression that I can only describe as calculating, and then continues to her door. 3 days later, she knocked on mine. I opened it. Hi, she said. She was pleasant in the way she was always pleasant. Surface smooth, good vibes only, the crystal and linen presentation fully engaged. I wanted to chat about the camera. Sure, I said. I just want to make sure it's not pointed at my car specifically, because that feels a little like surveillance, and I'm not super comfortable with that. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment because it was interesting. Not anger, not triumph, but a kind of focused clarity. She had noticed she was being documented, and her response was not to stop doing the thing being documented, but to attempt to remove the documentation. The camera is pointed at my parking space, I said, which is 14B. If your car is in 14B, yes, it will appear in the footage. Right, but the camera is legal, I said. It's positioned entirely on my window and covers public areas of the property. I've reviewed Oregon surveillance law and confirmed this with an attorney. Gwendolyn Park had confirmed this in month 3 when I'd asked. If you're concerned about your car appearing in footage taken of my space, the simplest solution is to park in 14F. She looked at me for a moment. The good vibes surface flickered slightly. I just think this is getting a little intense, she said. I feel like we got off on the wrong foot and now there's this whole thing. Jolene, I said, gently but very clearly. I've asked you to stop parking in my space twice. I've filed 2 formal complaints with management. The camera is documenting my space because my space is being used without my permission. That's the whole thing. She left without resolving anything, which I had expected. She was in my space the next morning. LP 2023-271, October 8th. 1 week before the lease renewal date, I had 341 incidents logged, 6 days to go, and then Sandra Okafor emailed me. The email said, "Hi Marcus, just a heads up that I've received a complaint from another resident regarding a camera you've installed. I want to discuss this before it becomes a formal issue. Can you come in this week?" I read the email twice. Then I called Gwendolyn Park. She was, as usual, precise. "Did you get prior written confirmation of the camera's legality when you installed it?" "No, I confirmed it through my own research and our consultation." "Okay, here's what you do. You send Sandra a reply today saying you're happy to discuss and you'll come in Thursday. Then between now and Thursday, you send me the lease and the HOA rules document, and I'll confirm in writing that the camera is compliant. You walk into that meeting with a legal opinion letter." The letter arrived in my email by Wednesday morning. Gwendolyn Park, 14 years in practice, 1 paragraph, very clear. I walked into Sandra's office on Thursday at 10 a.m. with the letter printed and a copy of my 341 incident spreadsheet. Sandra Okafor has been managing Lakeview Commons for 7 years. She is efficient, professional, and the kind of property manager who genuinely wants her building to run well and finds it deeply exhausting when it doesn't. She looked at the legal opinion letter with the expression of someone who was hoping this meeting would go a different way, and then she looked at the spreadsheet. I watched her scroll through it, all 27 pages of it at that point, her eyes moving down the incident IDs, and she made a sound that was not quite a word. "You have video for all of these?" she said. "Time-stamped, 2 camera coverage, clip reference numbers are in column G." She put the spreadsheet down. "Marcus, why didn't you?" She stopped herself. "You filed 2 complaints. I filed 2 complaints. I received 2 responses. The situation continued for 9 months after the second response." She rubbed her forehead. "Her lease is up in a week." "October 15th, I said. "Yes." She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from Sandra before. Not the tired, managing-it professionalism of our previous interactions, but something more direct. The expression of someone recalibrating who has leverage in a conversation. "I need to review the full documentation," she said, "before I can make any decisions." "Of course," I said. I put a USB drive on her desk. Full video archive indexed by incident number. "And I'll be submitting the PDF compilation to you and the board by email Monday morning." I went home. I waited 6 days. I made my coffee. I pressed send. LP 2023-347 was logged at 7:38 a.m. On October 12th, the morning I submitted the package. I know because I reviewed the Wise footage after I pressed send, and there it was. The Altima pulling in at 7:38, Dreamcatcher catching the morning light, parking in the geometric center of my space with the same unhurried confidence it always had. The email went to Sandra and 3 board members at 8:04 a.m. Sandra called at 8:31. I let it go to voicemail. She knocked on Jolene's door at some point that morning. I was watching through my peephole because I am a patient man who has waited 11 months and 28 days for this specific morning, and I was not going to miss it. I heard the conversation through the door. Not every word, but enough. The words lease and non-renewal were audible. So was Jolene's voice going from its default pleasant register into something with more edges in it. I heard that's insane and he's been filming me and this is harassment, and then Sandra's voice quieter, and then a door closing. Sandra knocked on my door 20 minutes later. I wanted to let you know, she said, that we'll be concluding the review process before Ms. Rafferty's renewal date. Given the volume of documented violations, the board's position is that renewal would not be appropriate. I nodded. I also want to say, she said with the expression of someone choosing her words carefully, that the way you handled this was unusually thorough. I'm a data analyst, I said. She almost smiled. It shows. Jolene Rafferty had 30 days to vacate. I know this because in a complex with thin walls and a shared hallway, information travels, and also because Phil Garrison, who I had followed up with twice during the documentation period, texted me 2 days after the submission to say simply, "Board voted, non-renewal, well done." I did not celebrate loudly. I am not a loud celebrating kind of person. I opened a beer, sat on my couch, and watched an episode of a cooking competition show I'd been behind on. Biscuit, my cat, sat on my feet. It was a very ordinary evening. The Altima was in 14B the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the first 2 weeks of the 30-day notice period, because Jolene Rafferty was not a person who modified her behavior in response to consequences she hadn't fully processed yet. LP 2023-348 through LP 2023-361. I logged them all because at this point it was just habit, and also because Gwendolyn Park had suggested I continue documenting through the vacate date in case there were any disputes. There were no disputes. Jolene moved out on a Saturday, 14 days into her 30-day notice, ahead of schedule, which I took as a sign that somewhere in her good vibes framework, there was a functional mechanism for reading a room when the room became sufficiently unambiguous. I watched the move from my window, not triumphantly, and I wasn't hanging out the window or anything. I just happened to be at my desk doing actual work, and I saw the van. I saw the dream catcher come off the rearview mirror, held in her hand, as she walked her last load out. I felt something complicated, not guilt. I want to be honest about that. I had spent a year being reasonable and patient, and nothing had changed until I made it change. But not pure satisfaction either. More like the specific tiredness of a long project completed. The way you feel when you close out a spreadsheet you've been maintaining for 11 months and realize you don't need to open it anymore. I closed Project 14B. I archived it to cold storage. Space 14B is mine now, in the uncomplicated, practical, functional sense that it has always been mine on paper. My name on the lease, my $85 a month, my number in yellow paint on the asphalt, but now also in the sense that I can pull into it at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday without routing around to visitor, without logging an incident number, without checking the camera. The new resident in 4C is a guy named Tom, who works night shifts somewhere and whose car, a gray Honda Fit, is rarely in the lot when I'm coming home. He nods in the hallway. He does not park in my space. He is, as neighbors go, perfect. I still have the cameras up. I'll probably take them down eventually. But there's something about the habit of documentation, of having a record, of knowing that if something happens, there's a number in a spreadsheet that proves it, that I find genuinely comforting in a way that may say something about my personality that a therapist could probably work with. Someone asked me once, after I'd told a short version of this story, whether I thought it was worth it. 11 months of logging, the camera, the legal consultation, the spreadsheet, all of it. I thought about the 214-page PDF. I thought about Sandra's face when she scrolled through it. I thought about the specific moment on October 15th when I pulled into 14B at 6:22 p.m. for the first time without anyone in it, turned off my car, and sat there for a minute in the quiet. Worth it doesn't quite cover it. The right word is earned. Every single morning for 347 mornings, she made the same choice. I just made sure there was a record of it. If you made it this far, you already know what space I'm parking in tonight.